The afternoon sunlight streamed softly through the lace curtains of the lounge, where the young bride sat beside her mother-in-law exchanging polite words about household matters. Outwardly, everything appeared peaceful, yet something within her stirred uneasily. It felt as if invisible eyes were tracing her every move. She tried to shake off the strange feeling, glancing around the quiet lounge. No one was there, only the still furniture and the faint hum of a ceiling fan. But the sense of being watched refused to fade. When her gaze accidentally shifted toward the staircase, her heart froze. Standing halfway up was her brother-in-law, Wasim, staring at her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. His eyes held no shame, only a silent boldness that left her trembling. Embarrassed, she quickly rose from her seat, murmured an excuse, and escaped into the kitchen. Her hands shook as she poured herself a glass of water, trying to steady her breathing. But before she could turn around, Wasim entered quietly. "What are you doing, sister-in-law?" he asked, his tone casual, but his eyes glimmering with mischief. Startled, she nearly dropped the glass. He laughed softly, stepping closer, and added mockingly, "Why are you so scared? It's not like I'm going to eat you." His smirk cut through her like a blade. She said nothing, only brushed past him and hurried upstairs, her heart pounding. It had been just 2 weeks since her marriage, yet during this short time, Wasim's behavior had begun to disturb her deeply. Though the house was filled with family, her in-laws, 2 brothers-in-law, and her husband, the younger one never missed a chance to look at her inappropriately. She often thought about telling her husband, Qasim, but fear held her back. He was a man of stern nature, known for his temper and his blind loyalty to his family. Before their marriage, he had warned her clearly, "If I ever hear a complaint about you, you'll see a side of me you can't imagine." Those words echoed in her mind every time she considered speaking up. By the time she reached her room, a suffocating heaviness had wrapped around her. She walked to the mirror, staring at her pale reflection, her thoughts clouded with confusion and worry. Evening was drawing near. Qasim would return from work soon. She forced herself to push away her anxiety, selecting a red dress from her wardrobe, a color she once believed he liked. Carefully fixing her hair and draping her scarf over her head, she descended the stairs with quiet hope that her husband's presence might ease her unease. Yet deep inside, a strange fear whispered that the night ahead would bring anything but peace. When Qasim returned from work that evening, the air in the lounge grew heavier. He sat silently on the sofa, exhaustion clouding his face, while she quietly placed a glass of water before him. She watched his expression carefully, hoping to find warmth or even the faintest smile. But his eyes were cold, unreadable. Without a word, he drank the water, stood up, and went straight to their room. Her heart sank. Did he not like my dress, she wondered? It was the same red outfit she had worn with such care. In the short time since their marriage, she had learned that even small things could offend him. Trying to ignore the worry tightening her chest, she prepared dinner and carried the tray upstairs. Inside the room, Qasim sat with his shirt off, his broad shoulders tense. She placed the tray near him and said softly, "Dinner is ready. I'll take out your clothes." But before she could move away, his hand gripped her wrist firmly, pulling her closer. His voice was low, almost a growl. "You will never wear this color again. I don't like it." His eyes locked with hers, sharp, controlling, leaving no room for protest. "And no makeup," he added coldly. I want your face clean. I don't want to see this false beauty again." She nodded quickly, too frightened to speak. His fingers dug painfully into her waist before he finally let go. "Remember what I said," he warned. "If I ever get a complaint about you, I will not forgive you." The words struck her harder than his grip. He turned away and walked into the bathroom, leaving her standing motionless, the echo of his anger ringing in her ears. Tears blurred her vision as she sat down on the edge of the bed. Quietly, she wiped her face, undid her hair, and changed into plain clothes. If simplicity pleased him, she would obey. After all, she believed love meant sacrifice, even when it hurt. When Qasim came out, he looked calmer. He gestured for her to sit beside him and surprisingly began to feed her with his own hands. "It's better this way," he said, his tone now gentle but heavy with warning. "If you always listen, life will stay peaceful. Don't make me angry. She lowered her eyes and ate in silence. Each bite felt tasteless, swallowed with fear instead of affection. Deep inside, a quiet realization began to bloom. She was living with a man whose love depended on her silence. That night passed in uneasy silence. Qasim's earlier anger still echoed in her ears like a curse that refused to fade. When he suddenly stood up, swept the dinner tray off the bed, and stormed out of the room, she froze in disbelief. A sharp crash followed as plates shattered on the floor, and then the sound of the front door closing behind him. For a moment, she could not even breathe. The fear of his unpredictable temper tightened around her like an invisible rope. She ran after him, calling his name softly at first, then louder, but he didn't stop. The house fell into silence again, leaving her standing alone at the doorway, trembling. Slowly, she returned to the room, tears slipping down her face as she picked up the broken plates from the floor. Her heart felt equally shattered. The food she had prepared with care now lay scattered like her hopes. When she finally carried the tray downstairs, she found Wasim in the kitchen making tea. She tried to ignore him, setting the dishes in the sink, but his eyes followed her with an unsettling calmness. "Did something happen between you and my brother?" he asked casually, his tone filled with a strange curiosity. He seemed very angry when he left. She did not reply. Keeping her eyes low, she turned to leave, but he stepped in her way, smirking. "You know, sister-in-law," he said softly, "if he ever hurts you, my shoulder will always be here. You can cry on it any time." Her face turned pale with disgust. She pulled her hand free from his grip and snapped, "Stay within your limits, or you'll see a side of me you won't like." Her voice shook, but her words cut through the air like a whip. Without waiting for his response, she walked away and climbed the stairs to her room, locking the door behind her. Inside, she collapsed beside the window, burying her face in her hands. Her tears came in waves, painful, uncontrollable. She thought about her parents and the peace of her old home. In this new house, every glance felt like a test, every silence like punishment. She realized that when a husband refuses to defend his wife, the whole household feels free to disrespect her. Lying on the bed later that night, she promised herself that no matter how much it hurt, she would keep quiet. Maybe tomorrow Qasim would calm down. Maybe love would return. She clung to that hope as the darkness swallowed her tears and the ticking clock marked another sleepless night. The night deepened, and silence covered the house like a heavy blanket. She had drifted into uneasy sleep, her eyes still damp from crying, when a strange feeling woke her. Someone was beside her. She could sense another presence close to her body, warm breath near her face, a shadow moving in the dark. For a moment, her heart raced. Then she remembered that Qasim always preferred to keep the lights off whenever he came close to her. It must be him, she told herself, trying to calm her heartbeat. Yet something felt different. A whisper brushed against her ear. "I am sorry for what I said earlier." "I shouldn't have shouted, but you know how easily I get angry, sweetheart." The voice sounded like Qasim's, but there was an unfamiliar roughness in it. And there was a smell, too. An odd, bitter scent that made her head spin. It smelled like alcohol. Her mind resisted the thought. No, she told herself. Qasim never drinks. Still, the doubt lingered. She wanted to reach for the lamp to see his face, but his hand pressed hers firmly, stopping her. "No lights," he murmured, his tone half command, half affection. He drew closer until she could feel his heartbeat against her skin. Words died slight in her throat. She had no strength left to question, no courage to resist. He took what he wanted in the same darkness that hid her tears. For a moment, she tried to find comfort in the thought that this was reconciliation, that maybe this was his way of saying sorry. But something about his touch felt different, detached, unfamiliar. Still, she forced herself to stay quiet, to believe that peace had returned between them. When she woke the next morning, pale sunlight filled the room. Qasim lay beside her, breathing softly, as if he had slept soundly all night. She stared at him for a long moment, confusion tightening her chest. If he had come to her last night, why did he look so peaceful, so unaware? She brushed the thought aside and smiled faintly, convincing herself that the storm had passed. After washing up, she went downstairs to begin the day. The house stirred with movement, the clatter of utensils, the murmur of her mother-in-law reciting verses. Everything looked normal, yet a shadow of unease still followed her. She could not name it, but something about last night felt wrong. It was as if a door had opened in the darkness, and what stepped through was something she was not ready to face. The morning unfolded quietly, with the faint smell of breakfast rising from the kitchen. She began her usual routine, carrying trays of food to each room. When she entered her father-in-law's room, she found him sitting peacefully on a prayer mat, his voice low and steady as he recited from the holy book. His presence brought her a moment of calm. She greeted him respectfully and placed the breakfast tray near him. He smiled warmly, placing his hand over her head and said, "May you be blessed with good children and a kind heart like yours." His words touched her deeply, offering the small comfort she had been craving since last night. But that peace shattered when she moved on to the next room. Her elder brother-in-law opened the door half-dressed, his bare chest exposed. Embarrassed, she immediately lowered her gaze and placed the tray in his hands, but he laughed softly and said, "Put it on the bed, sister-in-law." "Why are you handing it to me?" His tone carried a strange weight that made her shiver. Reluctantly, she stepped inside, set the tray down, and turned to leave, only to hear the click of the door closing behind her. Fear ran through her veins like ice. When she turned around, he was sitting on the bed, looking at her with an unsettling grin. Her hands trembled. She could feel the walls closing in. But after a few tense moments, he merely stared at her and said nothing. She rushed out of the room, gasping for air, her pulse racing. Outside the door, she paused to steady herself. The encounter left her shaken, disgusted, and confused. Why did every look, every word in this house feel so dangerous? Still trembling, she carried the next tray to the youngest brother-in-law's room. He greeted her politely, dressed neatly in his work clothes. "Thank you, sister-in-law," he said sincerely. "You've been taking care of everyone so well. Because of you, Mother is getting better." His respectful words felt like a balm on an open wound. She smiled faintly, whispering a small prayer of gratitude that at least one person in this house had manners. When Kasim finally came downstairs, she hoped for a kind word or even a nod. She placed his breakfast before him and carefully reached for his hand, whispering, "Are you still upset with me?" But he pulled his hand away and pushed the tray forward without looking at her. Then, without a single word, he stood up and left for work. Her heart sank again. The door closed behind him, leaving her alone with a silence that screamed louder than anger. She wondered what had gone wrong between them and why every day in this house began with fear instead of love. Days began to blend into one another, each filled with the same silent tension that hung like smoke in the house. Kasim's moods changed as swiftly as the wind, one moment cold and distant, the next pretending nothing had happened. For her, every hour felt like walking on broken glass, careful not to make a sound that might trigger his anger again. Her body grew weaker, her appetite disappeared, and a strange dizziness often overcame her. One morning, she vomited twice and could barely stand. She clutched her stomach, realizing something was changing within her, something fragile yet miraculous. When she gathered the courage to tell Kasim she wasn't feeling well and wanted to see a doctor, he dismissed her instantly. "You can rest here," he said curtly, eyes fixed on his phone. "Mother isn't well." "Who will take care of the house if you leave?" His words stung, but she stayed quiet. It wasn't the first time he chose his family's comfort over her well-being. By noon, her strength was almost gone. She sat in the lounge, pale and trembling, when Wasim walked in, still in his work clothes. He looked at her for a long moment before saying, "You don't look well, sister-in-law." "Should I take you to the doctor?" She shook her head quickly. "No, I'll go when Kasim comes back." Her voice was weak but firm. Wasim frowned slightly. "He'll be late." "I can't leave you like this. You've been vomiting all morning. Mother told me herself." The mention of her mother-in-law's concern surprised her. Why would she ask Wasim instead of Kasim? The thought unsettled her, but she was too tired to argue. Wasim left for a moment and returned with a shawl. "Come on," he said gently, draping it over her shoulders. "Let's get you checked. You'll feel better after seeing the doctor." Reluctantly, she followed him. The drive to the clinic was quiet. She stared out the window, lost in her thoughts, fear and discomfort mixed inside her. She reminded herself again that this was her husband's brother. This couldn't be wrong, could it? But every time his eyes met hers in the mirror, something about the way he looked at her made her heart race for the wrong reasons. By the time they reached the clinic, she felt completely drained. A kind lady doctor welcomed them, took her inside for tests, and told them to wait. As she sat beside Wasim in silence, she prayed quietly that nothing serious was wrong with her. She had no idea that the results about to be revealed would shake the foundation of her already fragile life. After a short wait, the clinic door opened, and the lady doctor walked in with a pleasant smile. She held a small file in her hands, her tone cheerful and congratulatory. Congratulations, she said warmly, looking first at Wasim and then at her. Your wife is expecting. You're going to be parents soon. The words hit her like thunder. For a moment she froze, staring at the doctor in shock. Then she quickly shook her head. You're mistaken, she said, her voice trembling. He's not my husband. He's my brother-in-law. The doctor's expression changed instantly. She stammered an apology, visibly embarrassed. Oh, I'm so sorry. I misunderstood. Congratulations to you anyway. But the damage was done. She could feel Wasim's eyes fixed on her, watching with an almost triumphant smirk curling on his lips. His silent amusement made her feel sick. She turned away, clutching her bag tightly while the doctor explained her condition. You are 3 weeks pregnant, she said kindly, but your health is weak. You're low on blood, and you must rest properly. Eat fruits, juices, and avoid stress. The doctor's tone softened. Take care of yourself and your baby. You'll need strength for both. Her heart trembled at the word baby. A spark of joy flickered within her despite the embarrassment. She was going to be a mother. Amid the confusion, fear, and loneliness of her new life, this tiny heartbeat inside her felt like a divine blessing. She silently thanked her creator for the miracle. Outside the clinic, the air felt heavy. Wasim walked beside her, whistling softly, still wearing that unsettling grin. As they reached the car, he opened the door for her with exaggerated politeness. Well, sister-in-law, he said lightly. So soon? A new life already growing inside you? The house will be full of laughter now. She didn't reply, staring out of the window as the car started, but then he leaned slightly closer, his tone turning bold. Just take care of yourself. We want the baby to be healthy and strong, not as delicate as you. She recoiled, glaring at him. Don't touch me, she snapped, jerking her shoulder away. Learn to respect boundaries. Wasim only chuckled, pretending innocence. Relax, I was just joking. The rest of the ride passed in silence, her hands trembling in her lap, her mind spiraling between happiness and dread. When they returned home, she went straight to her mother-in-law and shared the news. The older woman's face lit up instantly. My child, this is wonderful, she exclaimed, waving banknotes over her head as a sign of blessing. May this home be filled with joy again. She hugged her, kissed her forehead, and promised to make special food for her health. For the first time in weeks, she smiled sincerely. Yet beneath that fragile joy, a whisper of fear still lived in her heart because she knew that soon she would have to face Kasim. The house was filled with warmth that evening. Her mother-in-law's laughter echoed through the kitchen as she prepared sweet rice for celebration. For the first time since her wedding, she felt genuinely cherished. The elder woman wrapped her in a loving embrace, saying, Take care of yourself now. You carry our family's future. Those words, tender and sincere, brought tears to her eyes. After weeks of coldness and doubt, she finally felt seen. All day she waited eagerly for Kasim to return from work. Every sound of footsteps outside made her heart skip. She rehearsed in her mind how she would tell him, softly, with a smile, just the way he liked. She imagined his face lighting up with pride, imagined him holding her hand and promising to protect her and the child. That thought alone made her glow with quiet excitement. When evening came, the house quieted again. She prepared the room, lit a soft lamp, and placed a glass of water on the table. As the front door opened, she heard his heavy steps climbing the stairs. He entered without looking at her, his face stern, his eyes distant. You're home, she said gently, handing him the water. He drank it in one long gulp, still silent. I have something important to tell you, she began, her voice trembling with hope. He looked at her briefly, waiting. Today the doctor confirmed it, she said, smiling through tears. We're going to be parents, Kasim. You're going to be a father. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. She waited for joy, for surprise, for the warmth of his embrace. Instead, Kasim's expression hardened. His eyes widened in disbelief, and then anger. He stepped back, shaking his head. No, he muttered, voice rising. That's impossible. She froze. Impossible? What are you saying? Of course it's possible. We're married, Kasim. This is our child. But his reaction only grew colder. He turned away, running his hands through his hair as though trying to erase what he'd just heard. Without another word, he stormed out of the room, leaving her standing in the silence, her dream of happiness shattering like glass on the floor. Tears blurred her sight. She sat down slowly, clutching her stomach protectively, whispering to the life inside her, "It's not your fault. None of this is your fault." The sweet laughter that had filled the house hours ago had vanished. In its place came a hollow stillness and a dreadful realization. Something far darker was about to begin. The night stretched endlessly as she sat waiting for Kasim to return. Each tick of the clock felt heavier than the last. When the door finally opened, she looked up with tired eyes, ready to apologize again, to beg for his forgiveness, even when she didn't understand her fault. But his face was darker than ever. His silence was sharper than words. He walked past her without a glance, throwing his briefcase onto the sofa. The air around him felt different, heavy, dangerous. Summoning courage, she stepped forward. "Kasim," she whispered, "why are you acting like this? What have I done wrong?" He turned abruptly, his expression cold as stone. "Don't call me that," he said harshly. I don't want to hear your voice." "That child you're carrying, it isn't mine." For a moment, her mind went blank. She stared at him, unable to process the words. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice cracking. He met her gaze with anger that burned like fire. "You heard me. That child belongs to Wasim." Her breath caught. "How can you even say something so vile?" she cried, trembling from head to toe. "You are my husband." "I have never looked at anyone else," but he only scoffed. "You went to the doctor with him. You spent time talking to him. Don't deny it. I know what I saw." She staggered backward, clutching her chest. Tears poured down her face, yet his expression didn't soften. "You're sick," she said between sobs. "You're imagining things that never happen." "I'm sick?" His voice rose, echoing through the room. "You think I'm blind? You think I can't tell when my own wife betrays me?" His words stabbed at her heart like knives. She cried out, begging him to stop, but he pushed her aside and stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the walls seemed to shake. Desperate, she ran to her mother-in-law's room, her voice trembling as she explained everything. His accusations, his madness, his cruelty. The older woman listened in silence, her eyes growing heavy with sorrow. Then she sighed deeply and said, "My child, you must know the truth. Kasim isn't well. He's been unbalanced for years. He imagines things that aren't real. We thought marriage would make him better, but his mind plays tricks on him." The truth hit harder than any slap. She stood frozen, realizing her suffering had come not from hatred, but from a disease that had stolen the man she once loved. And yet the damage was done. Her name, her dignity, and her peace had all been destroyed by the one person who was meant to protect them. Her mother-in-law's words echoed in her ears long after she left the room. Kasim isn't well. He imagines things that aren't real. The truth left her stunned, hollow, and breathless. All the humiliation, the anger, the tears, everything suddenly made a painful kind of sense. He had never truly seen her as his wife. He had seen only the shadows of his illness. But knowing that truth didn't make the pain any less unbearable. She returned to her room, gathered her few belongings, and sat beside her suitcase for a long time. The house that was supposed to be her new beginning had turned into a place of fear and shame. By evening, she made her decision. There was nothing left for her here. No love, no trust, no protection. Quietly, she packed her clothes, folded her wedding dress one last time, and slipped out of the house that had witnessed her downfall. The moment she stepped outside, the wind hit her face, cold but strangely freeing. For the first time in months, she breathed without trembling. When she reached her parents' home, they were shocked to see her pale face and swollen eyes. Her mother embraced her instantly while her father's voice broke with pain. "Why didn't you tell us earlier, my child?" he asked, his hands trembling as he listened to her story. She could barely speak through her tears. The words came out in fragments of fear, abuse, humiliation, and accusation. Her father's expression hardened. No woman should live through that, he said quietly. You are not going back. Days passed and the legal separation was arranged. She didn't protest. There was no point in holding on to a bond that had already shattered her soul. In the months that followed, she gave birth to a baby boy, a small, fragile reminder that even in pain, life continues. When she held him for the first time, a strange calm filled her heart. She named him Rayyan, a name that meant door of mercy. Through him, she found the strength to live again. Now she spends her days with her parents, raising her son in an atmosphere of peace. She no longer cries for the past. The scars remain, but they remind her of what she survived. She has learned that a woman can bear loneliness, poverty, and even heartbreak, but she should never bear false accusations that destroy her dignity. In her quiet strength lies her victory. The world had tried to silence her, but she rose again, carrying within her not defeat, but survival.